Hi guys, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to our channel, and in this video I'm going to talk about Microsoft Cloud App Security, a CASB solution offered by Microsoft, which is cloud native, and that can help you improve the overall security and compliance posture of your enterprise. Now, since this will be the first video of the entire series that I'm going to create, I'm going to talk about what is CASB, how Microsoft Cloud App Security can help you implement all the use cases which typically falls under the category of a CASB solution itself by expanding the scope, let's say, to shadow IT discovery, data protection and compliance, threat protection, and in a nutshell, improving the overall security and compliance posture of your enterprise. Now, before I go ahead and talk about Microsoft Cloud App Security features and different combinations of use cases, let's spend around 2 minutes in terms of understanding how CASB is defined. Okay, so a cloud access security broker is a solution which can be a on-prem solution or a cloud native solution that sits between the cloud users and cloud applications. It helps you to monitor all the activities and then have security practices or security controls in place. Now, this is the definition which is as of now listed in Wikipedia. But what I will do is I will break down this in terms of making it more relatable and in terms of making it more easier for you guys to understand that how a CASB solution helps you uncover shadow IT and improves the security and compliance posture of your enterprise. Now, there are many entities which are binded together in terms of standards, in terms of services. My agenda here would be just to make you understand what MCAS is and what is the purpose, what is the use case, where you should inject the capabilities of the solution, and whether your enterprise needs this solution or not. Okay, so before I go ahead and talk about typically how MCAS works in a nutshell, let's consider an example wherein a user is using a corporate device and he or she is inside the office. I know with the current times that's not the use case anymore because more than 70 or 80% of the workforce is working remotely. So I will come to that aspect as well, that how MCAS can help you improve the security for the remote workers in a nutshell. Okay. So this user is using a corporate device, and on this particular device, the user will be accessing all kind of applications. It can be Office 365, it can be any application that you have integrated with Azure AD, or it can be a complete on-prem application. That means either going to ADFS or Active Directory. And these on-prem applications, they are not leaving any footprints in terms of any of the Microsoft Online Service solutions so that you can track. Okay, let's consider a use case wherein we are expanding our scope in terms of covering all kind of applications, right? But there is one more aspect here, and that is, since the user is sitting inside the office, you have all kind of network security in place. That means all the traffic is going through your network firewalls or your proxy devices, and this is a typical ideal situation, right, in which we expect things to work, right? But the reality is completely opposite, and in real time this is not how things work out, right? Because a user who is using a corporate laptop, for sure, which has all kind of securities in place, can use any application, right? Because when we talk about cloud adoption, or when we talk about the transition from a information security system to a cybersecurity information system, right? The things are different, right? The the number of applications which the users are using are getting expanded. The number of devices which the users are using also getting expanded. So the first scenario is basically about those applications which you know, or your infrastructure team knows, or your IT team knows, basically your enterprise is aware of, which we can say, let's say, approved apps, right? So Depending upon the job role of the user, he or she must use these applications. This is the first category. The other category is wherein the user is using an application which your IT team or your security team or your infrastructure team is not aware of. Now, the categorization of application can also be one of the parameter which you should keep in mind. Now, what do I mean by this? That the applications which the users are using can be social media, can be an application, wherein you provide some input or upload some data and you can get some insights, or let's say some storage applications, or let's say personal email, or let's say a different IM provider which is not approved in your enterprise. But the fact is that when it comes to knowing what the user is using, the device would be the first entity that can give you more insights. That means if I go ahead and monitor the logs of this particular device itself in terms of which endpoints were accessed, in terms of which IP addresses were accessed, how much data is uploaded, how much data is downloaded, and which are trusted applications, which are approved applications, this device should be the first point of contact, right? But since the user is in the office itself, that means the scope of the user is binded with the perimeter of my network, of my enterprise network itself. I can also monitor the network device itself, right? That means the devices through which the traffic is routed, to, let's say, to the internet, right? So in a nutshell, to uncover the shadow IT, that means those applications which are either not approved or your IT team doesn't know about those applications. In order to get those insights, you have two options. Either you can monitor the logs that are generated on the device itself, or monitor the logs that are going through your network appliances or through your network devices. Now, Microsoft Cloud App Security gives you the privilege to monitor these logs. If you have to onboard the device, if you want to see each and every activity that's happening on a device, you should integrate MDATP with MCAS, which is Microsoft Defender ATP, now known as Microsoft Defender for Endpoints, with Microsoft Cloud App Security, and all the information will be injected to Microsoft Cloud App Security as a service, which will get processed and you will get the right set of information displayed in terms of knowing what are the security standards which are adhered by an application, or what are the compliance standards which are adhered by an application. Now, I'm going to talk about each and every aspect in a lot more detail, but as of now, just keep this as a reference that the first pillar of Microsoft Cloud App Security is to make you aware about what's exactly going on in your enterprise, or which are those applications which are either not approved, or let's say which has high risk score. Just keep all these things in mind. Okay. Now, this is again an ideal situation wherein you are covering both the approved apps data as well as shadow IT data, because you are monitoring the logs on the device as well as your network layer devices, right? But the fact is that the same user can work from home. Now, in this case, let's say if you are only focusing on network devices, let's say your solution currently, if you have any solution that can help you with shadow IT part, is only capturing the logs that are generated by your on-prem proxy servers, or let's say firewall servers, then in that case you may miss that data, or you may not be aware of those applications which the user is accessing while he or she is working from home. Let's say they are not over VPN connection, right? Now, the fact is that in most of the CASB solutions that are available, they require an agent on that particular device. That means on this device, there must be an agent, right? But the fact is that with MCAS, when we say Microsoft Cloud App Security, all you need is the device to be onboarded to MDATP if you want to track all the activities that's happening on the device itself. Now, what do I mean by this? That the device is onboarded to MDATP, right? the device is already injecting all the information, all the activities that's happening on this particular device. And there comes the power of having unified intelligence when it comes to Microsoft, right? Because see, every service that falls under the category of threat protection or that falls under the scope of threat protection has shared intelligence, which is commonly termed as Microsoft Security Intelligence Graph, right? And that's how the information is being shared between different services, right? So if you integrate Microsoft Cloud App Security with MDATP itself, all the information which your endpoints are generating will be injected in MCAS. But the scope is not only limited to endpoints. Microsoft Cloud App Security also gives you the privilege to upload the logs which are generated at the network layer itself. That means the devices which are helping your endpoint to talk to internet, right? So with MCAS, with one liner to conclude Shadow IT, you can have the logs uploaded directly from the endpoints itself by getting them onboarded to MDATP, as well as you can upload all the logs of your network devices, either with a manual method or with an automatic log update. Okay, and in this case, you are actually covering the first use case of a typical CASB solution wherein it helps you to know or uncover shadow ID, right? Now let's say that this user is no longer using a corporate device. Okay, he or she is using a personal PC or a laptop or a mobile, or let's say a kiosk machine somewhere in the cafe or in the airport. Okay, but for some reason or for some set of users, you have exceptions wherein you want to give them the access so that they can access critical information if required, right? Now, if we talk about the approach that we were taking with Active Directory, we were having conditional access in place. We can have MFA if you are coming from an untrusted device, or let's say you should not access any kind of information from an untrusted device. I'm simply implementing a block condition or something like that. But the fact is that with MCAS, you can have session controls in place. Now, this is something which works on a reverse proxy architecture. Now, let me explain this in a lot more detail, okay? Consider a scenario wherein this user is as of now working from home using a personal laptop. Now, your IT team doesn't know or doesn't have any scope to control how the information will be handled on this particular device compared to a corporate device. Because in a corporate device, you can have DLP solutions, you can have endpoint protection, but the fact is that this device which the user is using is a personal device, right? And now let's say the basic applications, likewise, let's say HR application, right? Or let's say some of your internal application, let's say a line of business application, or let's say Outlook, email itself. These are some of the applications which you want or which you can allow the users to use on a untrusted device altogether, right? But how come MCAS, a cloud app security solution is helping you to add more security to these kind of use cases? With MCAS, I can have session controls in place wherein, let's say, I can define three different kinds of behavior for three different applications altogether. Okay, so let's say when the user is using a personal machine and they are going to outlook.office.com, they will not be allowed to download any content, or if they are downloading any information, it will be protected in real time. Now, what do I mean by this? That Microsoft Cloud App Security also integrates with Azure Information Protection. Typically, if I talk about how it works in a nutshell, Microsoft Cloud App Security has the capability to apply sensitivity labels in real time. Okay, so let's say as a user, I'm using a personal device and I'm trying to download an attachment. Now, when that attachment will be downloaded on my personal device, I will get read-only permission. This is just one of the use case, right? Now, this is something which makes sense, from an email perspective, because obviously you have to give read access, because then only they will be able to read and do the relative task which they have to do with the emails itself. But let's say when I talk about a line of business application, any application that is holding a confidential information itself, right? So what I can do is, apart from, let's say, having these two controls wherein the users cannot download, or if the content is getting downloaded, it should be protected. I can also have controls in place wherein they should not be even allowed to upload any information, right? Now, this is the section wherein the CASB aspect of Microsoft Cloud App Security is moreover moving towards data protection and threat protection itself. Now, what do I mean by threat protection? A typical attack usually starts from a file, which is, let's say, not processed by your endpoint, or which is not processed by, let's say, DLP or any of the data protection solution that you are using, right? So any ransomware attack or any attack typically starts from an unknown extension file, or let's say a file not known to the solutions that you are using, okay, so that it can make an impact once it is uploaded. Okay, so a typical use case can be for MCAS that when it comes to data protection is there are certain approved extensions and you are supposed to upload only those extensions, right? So if you are uploading any extension which is not known or which is not approved from the security and compliance standards of an enterprise, you should not be able to upload them, right? Now, as I've said before, that these are certain use cases which I'm listing, but when we'll talk about each and every feature, I'll go in a lot more detail. But there's one more thing, and that is, what should I say, the most appropriate security control which you can have for your applications that having exceptionally confidential information, and that is, apart from download or upload, you will also not be able to, let's say, copy paste any information from the browser itself, right? So these are session controls policies which work on an architecture of a reverse proxy, and the fact is that you don't need any on-prem setup for MCAS to work, okay, which is a typical use case with most of the CASB solutions, because Microsoft Cloud App Security is a cloud native solution itself. So there is no on-prem server required for any of these controls to work on the fly itself. So by now we have actually covered two different use cases. The first one was moreover related to shadow IT, and the second one is moreover related to session controls. If I talk about the exact name of this feature with which all the documentation is listed or you'll come across, it's basically termed as Conditional Access App Control. Okay, so this is something which I will be showcasing in the demo as well, but the kind of policies that we will be defining will be session controls itself. Okay, now let's talk about the third aspect, which is typically related to threat protection itself, and that is Microsoft Cloud App Security is also binded with Azure ATP, or now commonly known as Microsoft Defender for Identity. Now, since we know that Azure ATP, or let's say the on-prem version Azure ATA, is a kind of solution that actually works in terms of understanding user behavior and analytics, which has a learning curve of, let's say, 14 days, and after which, if there is any anomaly detected for a specific user, it gets typically highlighted. Okay, so if I go back to our deck in terms of knowing how it is going to help, now understand that when we were talking about the first use case and when we were talking about the second use case, all these capabilities were moreover related to the cloud native solution itself, right? Likewise, taking care of the logs which are getting uploaded, or likewise talking about the session controls which we have for applications, right? But the fact is that it's not only about the cloud applications which a user is accessing, right? We should also take care about the kind of activities which a user might do with on-prem resources, right? So now this is the third aspect of MCAS itself, wherein it gets closely integrated with Azure ATP or Microsoft Defender for Identity and can help you and can alert you, in fact, as an admin, if there is any anomaly detected, which is somewhere related or not related, or it has its own isolated existence. Right now, the last part which is left is data compliance itself. Now, what do I mean by this? That when any application is discovered in your enterprise with the help of Shadow IT part itself, Microsoft Cloud App Security has over more than 80 components or parameters which are checked for each and every application. And on behalf of those parameters which are checked, there is a typical risk score which is displayed, and you'll also come to know how many security certifications an application is adhering, or how many data compliance certification an application is adhering, right? So in this way, it's not only about the threat protection part of the shadow IT part that an MCAS solution or a CASB solution is helping you. It also helps you in terms of data compliance. Now, there is one more feature which MCAS has to offer, and that's moreover related to defining file policies. That means that I can have a scan in place, or I can have a policy in place that is going to scan all of my repositories, right? Typically Office 365 and some of the cross-platform applications as well, likewise Dropbox or Box, or let's say GCP. Okay. Now, these are the cross-platform storage which can also be scanned by Microsoft Cloud App Security, and that can help you to get the data protected. Okay, so if I talk about four different pillars or four different kind of service which Microsoft Cloud App Security has to offer, it always starts with the shadow ID part itself. Then you have information protection, wherein you are applying classification labels to files while they are getting downloaded, or you are running a scan in your tenant and then getting the files protected. Then you have threat protection in place, wherein Microsoft Cloud App Security is integrated with Azure ADP or Microsoft Defender for Identity and gives you more insight in terms of knowing what's happening with the user object for on-prem resources. And the last one itself is compliance assessment, wherein you'll come to know that how many applications are adhering to the compliance standards, which are vendor neutral, or let's say which are available for different industries, or let's say specifically for your industry, which compliance standard exists and whether any application that exists in your enterprise is adhering those standards or not. So this is a typical overview of Microsoft Cloud App Security. It has four different pillars, and every pillar has its own scope. And this is how multiple features or multiple functions are combined to make it more integrated. Or if I talk about a typical tagline which you will read in any of the Microsoft documentation, it says that Microsoft Cloud App Security is a uniquely integrated CASB solution. Now, why it is termed as uniquely integrated CASB solution? Because Microsoft Cloud App Security is integrated with Azure AD Identity Protection, Azure ATP, Microsoft Defender ATP, and many more, right? So this is a typical overview for this particular video in terms of understanding what is Microsoft Cloud App Security. So let's talk about a quick summary of what all we have discussed. We have discussed about a CASB solution in a nutshell, what it should offer, how Microsoft Cloud App Security is going to help you achieve all the use cases when it comes to uncovering shadow IT, information protection, threat protection. In the next video, I'll proceed with setting up Microsoft Cloud App Security in terms of roles, licenses, and different requirements when it comes to prerequisites. So if you think that this channel is helping you to learn anything new, please feel free to subscribe and share this video with your technical community. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.